Well, good evening, everybody.
Yeah, great to be here tonight.
Thank you.
My goodness, we've got some heavyweights here at the table for Queer News.
I just lost a few pounds.
I'm on Weight Watchers.
I've recovered from pride, so here I am.
Boy, was it hot.
I even have some color toning on my face because I am so red.
Yes.
Yesterday, I looked like a tomato.
Yeah, and it's between you and me who's the whitest,
Yeah,
right?
That's right. No,
I'm albino.
that's Glenn.
Okay.
And Gabriel here for first time.
Yeah,
Yes.
welcome
Virgin.
to the table, Gabriel.
Another table.
Rothaus, we've got some great and interesting news.
Yeah.
Well, we begin tonight by queering up breaking news. President Biden calls for global support of the LGBTQ plus community at the United Nations General Assembly. Watch this.
We all must call out and condemn the targeting and oppression of racial, ethnic, and religious minorities when it occurs whether it occurs in Xinjiang or northern Ethiopia or anywhere in the world. We all must defend the rights of LGBTQI individuals so they can live and love openly without fear, whether it's Chechnya or Cameroon or anywhere.
This morning, President Biden spoke at the United Nations General Assembly in front of the world's leadership. He spoke out for changes to fight climate change, discussed the dysfunctional relationship between the U.S. and China, and called for global unity to fight the pandemic. He also spoke in support of LGBTQ plus rights globally, saying, quote, "We must all defend the rights of LGBTQI individuals," end quote. In his speech, he specifically cited anti-LGBTQ crackdowns going on in Chechnya and Cameroon. He spoke directly after Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who is a vocal opponent of LGBTQ rights, addressed the General Assembly.
Well, I'm glad he made that statement on such a world platform. I hope that, other countries follow the lead and they get pressure put on them from the rest of the world as well.
I thought of you today, Steve. What did you think about the president doing this at the General Assembly?
Well, I thought that, he clearly was sending a message. And shortly after, I received a press release from Log Cabin Republicans. They were disappointed,
Of course they were.
in the Biden speech, and they regretted that President Trump wasn't there again this year talking about decriminalization of homosexuality.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah.
That takes me by surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
Just anyone to dream of the days when Trump was in office.
Well, amazing in the moment is representation matters. We've discussed that many times here at Queer News tonight. But when the President of the United States is standing in front of many or most of world's leaders, of
That's
countries
a big deal.
around the
It
planet,
is. Yeah.
at the UN General
absolutely.
Assembly of basically a kickoff of the year in terms of world government, political governments. It's a big moment for him to take the time to recognize the need to support LGBTQ rights. Cannot be underestimated the impact that the simple couple of sentences will have on the rest of the world. So quite
Raising our voices.
Absolutely.
well, welcome to Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only LGBTQ plus daily evening news. It's time to queer up the news. It is 8 p.m. Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, and we are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. And the world headlines today. So many of your important stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
Thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ plus evening news show. Whatever happens, you will see it. Queer News Tonight is supported by viewers like you. We are part of the Happening Out television network, HotSpots magazine, and WMEG events. HotSpots is celebrating 36 years of the LGBTQ plus experience. Merged, we bring you the best of LGBTQ plus news, entertainment, and support of our community.
This evening, we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ plus community from South Florida, America, and across our planet. I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson. Let's start by welcoming anchor Glen Weinzimer. Glen is the founder of the Smart Ride, the largest AIDS bicycle ride in the country and the only one of its size to give back 100% of funds raised to AIDS services organizations. He also owns Bona Italian Restaurant, where they celebrate Give Back Mondays, where a portion of all sales go to a different charity every week. Welcome, Glen.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate that. And we're coming up on our Smart Ride this November 19th and 20th, and it's going to be a great event bringing people back together in a safe environment.
Great.
Let's welcome Cindy Brown. She's an icon in the LGBTQ plus community, early organizer of Miami AIDS Walk, the White Party for Care Resource, and other major events. She has served as executive director of Miami-Dade Gay and Lesbian Chamber Foundation and LGBTQ Visitor Center. She's founding executive director of Miami Beach Pride and currently serves as program manager for Jewish Community Services, OIV, LGBTQ Lambda Living Program for LGBT seniors. Welcome, Cindy, my brethren.
Thank you, Glenn.
You're
As a third-time Smart Rider, I encourage you to join us on the ride. In how many days, Glenn?
2 days.
2 days.
2 days.
No, it's not happening in 2 days. In how many days is the
Oh, about 60 days.
60 days.
60
okay,
days.
so you got 60 days to train or volunteer.
Raise money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now let's welcome Gabriel Paez. Gabriel is the program director for the Miami-Dade LGBTQ Advisory Board. The board is responsible for advocating for policies to advocate Miami-Dade LGBTQ community. To advance the LGBT community, The LGBTQ Advisory Board also advises the Board of County Commissioners on initiatives while promoting productive community relations and cultural understanding for a better quality of life for all county residents. Welcome, Gabriel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here tonight. Well, let's welcome anchor Steve Rothaus. He's a pioneer journalist that covered LGBT issues at the Miami Herald for more than 2 decades, beginning in 1985, and came out at work 2 years later. He served as a national board member of the NLGJA, the Association of LGBT Journalists, and founded the association's newsroom outreach project, visiting newspapers, television stations, and colleges to discuss LGBTQ plus news coverage and workplace issues. He's a GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Newspaper Columnist and known as an LGBT pioneer in mainstream journalism, according to Columbia Journalism Review. Good evening, Steve.
Gabriel, great to meet you.
Likewise.
Very good. We are the reporters for Queer News Tonight, and this evening we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ plus community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Tuesday, September 21st.
Well, let's begin by queering up the USA. The Department of Justice expands probe in anti-LGBTQ prison violence in Georgia after 44 murders in the last 12 months. LGBTQ Nation reports that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, has opened an investigation into the allegedly deplorable conditions in Georgia's state prisons, sparked by an ongoing investigation into anti-LGBTQ sexual violence committed by prisoners and staff in Georgia. The sweeping probe will investigate the culture of violence in Georgia prisons, which resulted in at least 44 homicides in prison in 2020 and 2021, and at least one major prison riot. Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark said that the DOJ has received sufficient justification to expand the investigation into whether the state's prison system violates the Constitution's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishments. with families of inmates and advocacy groups documenting the deplorable conditions in Georgia prisons, including prisoners covered in blood, groups of inmates armed with machetes, and evidence of cells with no functioning toilets.
You know, the inhumane way that human beings are treated, it just disgusts me. And there's absolutely no protection for LGBT, especially trans people in prisons. And
it sounds like this has been going on for more than almost like a decade, because it goes back to Obama had made some, from what I read, had made some initial investigation into this situation there.
Absolutely. It happened in 2016, the Obama administration, before leaving the White House. And it was the first Department of Justice probe, into focusing LGBTQ inmates, the first one specifically towards that. And
why do you think that we see stories about this? It's the same as the state laws that are being passed, anti-LGBT, etc., in the South. Why do we see it so much in the South?
I think it's a mentality of this fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism, where it's misogynist, it's homophobic, it's anti-immigrant, it's anti-everything. And I do believe that it's been happening forever, but I think it's worse after Trump. And unfortunately, these kinds of jobs, corrections officers, there are a lot of amazing corrections officers, but in certain areas of the country, they attract a certain type of person that it's bound to happen.
Cultural change. There has to be a cultural change, because it's
totally.
And that's where the root is. I think it goes back to it, because if we don't get it from there, it's always going to be there.
And the South was the last to free the slaves, so it's
exactly.
It's never been a liberal part.
And what we have to see is why did it take 44 to bring it to light, and in 1 year, what really happened in that year that those occurred 44?
I'd actually be curious to find out what the number was in previous years, because perhaps now we're just getting full reporting of it.
Right.
I mean, sadly, this is Georgia, but in Florida, the Miami Herald for years has been writing about, not necessarily South Florida prisons, but prisons upstate. Horrible stories about women being raped in prison, stories about, inmates who burned to death in showers while the guards were looking the other way. This is an awful situation that, we are just some of the victims of these kinds of crimes.
This past week, I was in Tallahassee, and I met a homeless who had been in jail in Pensacola, in the area, and we got talking, and I asked him what happened to his teeth, and he said the warden had asked for oral sex and hadn't provided, and in 2 days he got beaten up by the biggest inmates, two of the biggest inmates. So yes, it's pretty tragic.
All right, up next, Queer Up Business. Group behind Little Nas X, Satan Shoes, is now serving Chick-fil-A on Sundays for $6.66. The collective Mischief, pronounced Mischief, MSCHF, who helped Little Nas X create his infamous Satan shoes, is at it again. Now they're taking aim at anti-LGBTQ plus food chain Chick-fil-A with their devilish pranks. They announced on Monday that they would be serving Chick-fil-A's not-so-fresh chicken sandwiches as part of a Sunday service. This coming Sunday in New York City, the price just $6.66. Mischief is also encouraging people to visit the local chain and say, thank you, at Satan, for at Mischief misappropriating at Chick-fil-A on the Lord's Day.
That's just hilarious. I love it. Little Nas, he just keeps it coming.
When you least expect it, too.
Yeah, the best way to protest is do it humorously.
Exactly.
Yes, 100% agree with you.
The sign of the devil on Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
On the Lord's Day.
Yeah, well, now let's queer up education. Students yell slurs and carry handmade Confederate flag at terrifying anti-gay school rally. Watch this.
Homophobic language and aggression is what some students, including those from the Gay Straight Alliance Club at Bartram Trail High School, were met with on campus Friday. We've bleeped out the derogatory language and blurred their faces because of their age, but what can still be seen is students stomping on what we're told is a pride flag and holding homemade Confederate flags.
It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying.
You're hearing from a parent whose daughter was a part of the group that was targeted in this video. She asked that we conceal her identity for her family's safety.
She was approached by one of the boys who started, yelling at her and saying, you're gay, you have no rights, and, kind of spitting at her. And she just walked faster and got on her bus.
No parents or students at the school wanted to talk to us on camera today, but the school district tells me the actions in this video line up with level 3 and level 4 infractions in the student code of conduct. That means punishment could include, but is not limited to, in-school suspension, placement in alternative school, expulsion, or referral to law enforcement. The school district said via email today, quote, "This behavior is not acceptable and is not indicative of the culture and students at Bartram Trail High School. It's very disappointing that these students handled themselves in this way."
River City Pride is being celebrated in Jacksonville on October 2nd, but one of the local schools is not feeling this year's theme, Stronger Together. A group of students recently organized a rally at Bartram Trail High School that involved shouting anti-LGBTQ slurs, stomping a pride flag, and threatening members of the school's Gay Straight Alliance. Cell phone footage shows students yelling homophobic and transphobic comments at students from the GSA. The St. Johns County School Department and Sheriff's Office have both said they are investigating the incident. I really hope that they have quick and appropriate consequences for these young people, or, it needs to be evident that it is not okay.
You have to go back to the parents because they're learning this from somewhere. Even if it's not their parents, it's someone else's kids' parents that are then creating this environment where they think it's okay, and it's not. Because if you grow up in a family that's more liberal, it isn't an issue. So it is a trained behavior, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I think it's peer pressure at school too, but especially in a school setting. I think both the school district, and it sounds like they are investigating, as well as the sheriff's office. I think that consequences need to come swiftly.
I think that perhaps is the only difference between what we might have seen a few years ago, is the fact that the school district itself is saying that, these students, that the punishment could be not limited to in-school suspension, placement in an alternative school,
even
expulsion or referral to law enforcement.
Right.
And that, the behavior that we're seeing of these kids, there's nothing new about that kind of bullying.
Absolutely
but
not.
It's the fact that the school district and hopefully law enforcement will follow through as well.
Yeah, it certainly is
It's more
time.
like hate speech versus hate crime, though. So,
Well, there's consequences to be had.
I think the most disturbing thing in the video is how they corner over diversity issues. They corner students from the GSA. And the most disturbing images to me in the cell phone video is them stomping on the little pride flag. Because we constantly learn that we should learn from history. And as I'm watching them basically tear down the process of a pride flag and stomping all over it and cornering an individual, a group of people cornering an individual, immediately I had this washover of, wait, is this 1939 Berlin?
Right.
wow.
Or I was thinking January 6th, mimicking that whole sort of like a hateful crime against people.
Right,
So-
and it could be that against our capital, or 39 in Berlin against the Jews. Is this 1959 in Birmingham, Alabama?
Right.
It is so emblematic
reliving
of what
everything.
we have seen over and over again. But the difference is this is 2021, and
But it still starts at the top.
response, exactly. I hope their response is quite strong.
Yeah.
Well, let's queer up the USA. TikTok shows a 12-year-old destroying her gamer by saying that's really fucked up. for being homophobic. Watch this story.
Seriously have a problem with people being gay. So you're homophobic. So you just blatantly admit to being homophobic? You realize that means I automatically don't like you? Because that's really fucked up. You promise you aren't you promise you guys aren't just joking. I mean, okay, but my sister is lesbian, which
Recently, TikToker @Bumblebee Duo posted a video of her 12-year-old little brother telling off some of his online gaming friends for a homophobic comment. In the video, he says, quote, "So you blatantly admit to being homophobic? You realize that means I automatically don't like you because it's really fucked up." In a follow-up video, he asked if his friends were joking since his sister, who's filmed in the video, is a lesbian. He also said that the acronym LGBT stands for more than just gay, and that not all trans people are gay. He tells his friends, I generally do care, and I want to have this argument.
The kid's brilliant.
Yeah.
The kid is complete opposite of the story before this. Here he's growing up, defending his sister and educating at the same time, and he's making very strong statements for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, and the gamer community is very harsh.
Yeah. And he's being very patient. He's listening to the other guy. He's not arguing and just making his statements. I was really impressed with him. And
he's waiting for the person to make their point, and he's not irritated. There's no volume. Raises his volume.
And he never lost the game.
No.
What's really great is that the online community has rallied behind these kids, and at first they thought, well, they're going to raise money maybe to get him a new gaming chair. But actually the sister said, no, if we raise money, we're going to donate that money to the Trevor Project.
Yep. Excellent.
Oh, wow.
And also for Fox Sake, which is an LGBTQ-run wildlife rescue organization.
Excellent.
So they're continuing to, just make the best of this bad situation.
It's really interesting to me as I watch. First off, I'm loving TikTok. I'm not the profile for TikTok, but I'm loving what I see at TikTok. A couple of interesting notes. First off, the kid doesn't know he's being filmed, so he's not performing because he doesn't know that we're getting to voyeur watch him. So we're hearing his words. I also love the fact that it is a universal rejection. This is, at 12 years old, what we're going to see 20 years from now from most of the American population.
The future is bright.
Tucker Carlson's are time-stamped.
Right.
They're time-stamped.
Thank the goddesses for that.
This is what the future is going to be.
Right.
And last but not least, how impressive it is that he is this LGBT warrior for his sister and therefore our entire community, while not even missing a beat as he's playing his game. Oh my goodness. You are a warrior hero.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Now let's queer up politics. The Veterans Administration says LGBTQ plus veterans dishonorably discharged for sexual orientation will get full benefits. On Monday, the day of the 10th anniversary of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the VA announced that service members discharged for their sexual identity will be eligible for full benefits. In a statement, the department said, quote, LGBTQ plus veterans are not any less worthy of the care and services that all veterans earn through their service, and VA is committed to making sure that they have equal access to those services, unquote. According to the VA, approximately 100,000 service members were discharged for their sexuality, including an estimated 14,000 discharged during the 17 years of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Well, I think that's a great step they're taking. I knew a gentleman who was in one of the military academies, and when they found out that he was gay, they kicked him out of the academy, and they made him pay for the years of education that he had already received. And, you know, I hope that they're going to turn all of that around and make these people.
This is a huge initiative to go back, and there's so many of the LGBT that were dishonorably discharged and have not filed to have that grievance, or I don't know how they phrase that, removed so that they're now entitled to benefits. They each have to step up at this point for that. And how many people have passed and never got benefits.
Exactly.
And the benefits are enormous. We're talking about education, we're talking about housing, we're talking about medical, and, you know, at least for the older vets, they will be able to have access to medical care. But, you know, all the years of lost education.
And you know why that is so important? Some people are critical about the benefits that you get in the service. But the reason why the benefits exist is because we don't draft in the military in America. It is an all-volunteer force. So the shocking thing here is of the 100,000 that have been basically drummed out of the military for their sexual orientation were people that were stepping up and volunteering for their country. The reason this is so big is because now they're going back to adjust and correct a wrong. The thing that surprises me the most is that for the most part, we have our pulse on the news. Steve, of course you do. It surprises me that this story is not bigger in the LGBTQ community than it is. It's a reflection that we also may be going along with this kind of ignore or I don't care, which is very sad because these are all patriots that volunteered to serve America, and they deserve these benefits, and I'm glad that they're going back now.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think part of it is that, you know, I know that on Friday, the Military Times did a short story about this. ABC News followed up, you know, yesterday with the story. And I do know that there were people pitching stories for the 10-year anniversary for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but because they didn't know, apparently, that this was coming down, they were looking at more traditional look-backs, or, you know, let's talk about what happened before, what happened since. But clearly, if they had known that this was about to come down, it would have been a bigger story within the community.
Yeah.
What a week for us so far, and it's only Tuesday, huh?
Right.
That is our queer headlines for today. So let's catch up on LGBTQ news surrounding COVID-19 with our special segment called Quarantine Quickies.
Queer News Tonight has reported on coronavirus on every newscast since January 6th, 2020. Tonight, we report that as of today, more than 3,018,000 LGBTQ plus Americans have contracted COVID-19.
Queer News Tonight remembers the more than 48,000 LGBTQ plus Americans who have died from coronavirus.
But the news is improving because as of today, more than 386 million vaccination doses have been administered in the U.S.
That is our pandemic news for tonight. Next, we report on our partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. We are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine in supporting that partnership. Heading Out Television Network broadcasts the largest LGBTQ plus religious live broadcast in the world, as more than 30,000 watch every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Watch this.
I'm Auntie Mame, South Florida's black, bearded drag mama, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
Next up, welcome to Queer News Tonight's Q&A on LGBTQ plus health and pandemic. Since February 2020, this segment has been unique in America, answering you LGBTQ plus community questions about our unique health needs. We are proud to have Queer News Tonight health anchor, Dr. Howard Grossman.
He's an American pioneer in HIV/AIDS medical treatment and was the executive director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. He's a nationally recognized medical expert and proud member of our LGBTQ plus community.
Well, good evening, Dr. Grossman. And before we move into questions, what are your thoughts over what you've seen in this week's health news for our community?
Well, I think we had some very good news this week, actually, in regard to vaccinations. So we heard two things this week. One, that the Pfizer vaccine seems to be very active in children. So the idea that hopefully by Halloween we can start vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds, that they had a good antibody response. And the other news today was that the J&J vaccine, when boosted, seems to be about 94% effective, which puts it back in the range of the other vaccines. So I think those are really good. That's really good news, and I think hopefully will help people.
And before we jump into other questions, are you here in Florida, or are you in your new home in Chicago?
I see, Paul.
No, I'm still here packing. If you see behind me all the boxes.
Oh, yeah, I see now. Okay, great. All right, we've got to have dinner before you leave. All right, okay. Gabriel, jump in.
Yes, Dr. Grossman, good evening. It was recently announced that a low dosage shot of the Pfizer vaccine for children between 5 and 11 is showing positive results. Do you think schools will require, like they do for other vaccines?
That's going to be a government decision, unfortunately, for people here in Florida. Our governor is not going to mandate it, and it's going to keep telling people that they should make their own decisions. But I think in other places, you're going to see it pushed very strongly. I would imagine the mayor of New York is going to be pushing very strongly to vaccinate those 1 million plus children going to school there. And I think once again, it's going to really depend on where you live.
As I rarely have the opportunity to go from children to horses, but we're going to do that tonight.
No man is greater to do that than you.
Dr. Grossman, horse owners are unable to get ivermectin for their livestock due to people thinking it's a COVID cure. Can you see this happening with other products?
Well, I'm not sure. They're pushing things like colchicine, which is used for gout, and some other things. There is a human use for ivermectin, but that's for scabies, and it's a single dose and it's a human dose, not a horse dose. I think there's a big difference between horses and people, at least as far as weight goes, I hope. Yes. I read stories now that the veterinary places are locking it up the way that the pharmacies lock up antihistamines, because people were making crystal meth out of it. It's just crazy. And emergency rooms around the country are reporting, poisonings from ivermectin. There's clear data. Very early in the epidemic, there was some question about whether it might work. And, I know that some doctors here in Fort Lauderdale at Broward Health used it. It didn't work at all. And there's clear data that says it doesn't work. And in fact, at horse doses, it's going to poison people.
I'm just, as a follow-up there, Howard, I'm honestly very confused about this. What is going on in someone's mind that they reject a vaccine from Moderna or Pfizer or Johnson, but then they're willing to use the horse liver injection? What's going on in their mindset to come to that conclusion? What do you think it is?
I think it's two things. We live in this anti-science society that people have been trained for years not to trust science and to think, to not believe in it. From climate denial to, you name it. Talking about, Donald Trump and hating wind power. But I think that more of this is, reading a lot of things is just fueled by this rage against any authority. People who are feeling and being told that they're disenfranchised, and lied to in that way. And so they just rage about everything. I think there's the level of anger in this country is just unbelievable, and it's fed by the media, which tries to keep people's eyes glued to the TV screen rather than educating people.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
present company accepted.
Yeah, and it's crazy, I think, because science made ivermectin. So it's still, a medical product, but yet they'll take that over something that has actually been proven to work to keep people. But anyway, Dr. Grossman, another question.
I love the way the people who say this, while they're busy smoking cigarettes,
Right.
or whatever they're doing that's hurting their bodies, they're perfectly willing to do that, but not to take a medicine.
Well, next question for you, Dr. Grossman. There was a vigil this evening in Orlando to honor the 50,000 Floridians who have died to COVID. Do you think events like this help people realize how important it is to get vaccinated?
Well, Glenn, I don't think they hurt, but truthfully, I think those events really are speaking to the converted. The people who show up at those things are going to be people who believe in science, believe in the vaccine, believe that we can stop this together. And the other people just ignore it. The 80 million people in this country have not received a single dose of vaccine as of today.
Mind-boggling.
Wow. Amazing.
It's amazing. I heard, well, I already know the answer, but I heard Africa is sitting at about 4% vaccinated on the continent.
Wow.
Yes. And I think, you see these skeptics about vaccine boosters. And one of the things that they keep pushing is a social agenda that we should be sending vaccine to third world countries. But truly, the solution is not, we can't generate enough vaccine for the world. But what we could do is break the patents for Pfizer or Moderna and force what they call compulsory licensing, that they need to share their technology with other countries so they can build their own factories to make their own vaccine. That would be a way to treat the world.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that is this evening's Queer News Tonight's Q&A on LGBTQ plus health and pandemic. We're here every Tuesday with Dr. Howard Grossman to answer your questions. Do you need medical assistance? And of course you do. We encourage you to contact Dr. Howard Grossman, who will be joining, as I alluded to, the team at the Howard Brown Medical Center in Chicago. And this is the largest LGBTQ plus health resource in the entire Midwest. Thank you again, Howard, for being with us tonight. And dinner. We're going to have dinner before you leave.
I know a place.
Yeah, we're going to have dinner at Bona. Right. All right. Well, next, we finish tonight's Queer News headlines with a segment we call LGBTQ plus Flash News. In LGBTQ plus Flash News, from HotSpots magazine, Celebrate Orgullo's 2021 festival explores the art of illusion. Our partners at HotSpots magazine report today on this year's Celebrate Orgullo, and this year's event explores the history and impact of drag. The first person to describe himself as the Queen of Drag in the United States was William Dorsey Swann, born enslaved in Hancock, Maryland, who in the 1880s started also hosting drag balls in Washington, D.C., attended by other men who were former slaves, and often raided by the police, as documented in newspapers. Find out more about the history of drag in the LGBTQ plus community, as well as a full schedule of events for Celebrate Orgullo in HotSpots magazine on stands now. And I'm going to read this article, which I haven't yet, because drag in the 1880s is really astonishing to me.
Yeah, it really sounds fascinating, and Celebrate Orgullo always has some really great programming, so I have no doubt that it will be spectacular.
I wonder if they did snap back in that time.
Or a
fan. Yeah. Well, the fan, of course they did. You remember.
I would just like to give a shout out to Herb Sosa and to Unity Coalition, which has stuck with this for years and years, and really they deserve a lot of credit for keeping this thing going.
I echo that. Sure.
Hey, Glenn.
Okay. Next up, LGBTQ plus Flash News. Fierce new species of insect named after RuPaul because of her legs for days. A new insect was just discovered by etymologists in Australia, and this species of soldier fly is getting 10s across the board for its glam looks. Brian Lessard, an etymologist for Australia's Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, said naming the new fly was an obvious decision. Lessard said, "I was watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race while examining the species, and I know it would challenge RuPaul on the runway, serving fierce looks." He also said, "The fly has a, quote, costume of shiny metallic rainbow colors, unquote, and legs for days." I have to say, you know, first of all, the fact that he's studying this new bug and watching RuPaul at the same time is just amazing.
I think Lessard, I mean, is just like sticking with this. Like 10 years ago, he named, you know, a new fly for Beyonce, the Queen Bee herself.
There you go.
I love the fact that there can be a space at Queer News Tonight where we open with the president on the floor at the United Nations and we end with a rainbow, long-legged fly that we call RuPaul.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not scared of spiders, and this looks like a really good-looking spider, so maybe I'll see one day. LGBTQ plus flash news. Gillian Anderson's Emmy dress was covered with tiny penises. I always get these stories, I don't know why. Agent Scully always had big dick energy, but now she's brought enough for everyone. On Sunday, she won the Primetime Emmy for Best Supporting Actress in a Television Series for her role on The Crown. And her red carpet look, designed by Chloe, was decorated with tiny penis charms. While we're happy about the bisexual actress's win, many in the LGBTQ plus community are upset about the total snub of the FX hit Pose. Well, I think our writer has an axe to grind with the Emmys here and Pose.
I just didn't think that the penises were large enough. There were just a lot of them, and they were just tiny.
You wanted bigger penises.
If you're going to do it big.
Insert joke here.
No,
and walking away from that. Go ahead.
But I mean, a lot of people were very unhappy with the way the Emmys turned out the other night. The fact that a dozen of the major awards to, you know, actors and actresses went to white people, and that there were no people of color who received awards for acting. You know, that didn't sit well with a lot of people.
No, not even a Latino on a Hispanic Heritage Month, nothing.
Yeah, hashtag whitest Emmys ever.
I heard that one.
Yeah. All right, Gabriel.
All right, we continue. LGBTQ plus flash news. Washington football team hosted their first Pride Night. Why did it take so long? The Washington football team, based in Washington, D.C., had never hosted a Pride Night before September 16. Many other teams in the NFL will have an annual Pride event, but in show solidarity with the Native American community, the D.C. area LGBTQ plus groups refused to partner with the team under the previous name of the Redskins. After the team changed their name, their ownership and management has made it a goal to create an inclusive environment for all football fans at their games. The initiative seems to have worked for everyone, as the Washington football team defeated the New York Giants by a single point. And just 1 point? I thought there would have been more.
Yeah. After spending the weekend at Miami Beach Pride, I am officially a Redskin also, and I don't like it either.
Well, you know, lesbians are supposed to like football, but I don't know anything about this.
I've always been a big fan of the front end or tight end. Tight end. You know, I am having trouble. I'm getting older. Whatever.
Yeah.
We know where his.
No, I know little about football myself, but I think
you know a tight end.
Yeah. I also think that the allyship that is being shown in this is very important. It's, you know, we're not standing by ourselves. Plus, there's the intersectionality. You know, we're not all one thing or the other. We're everyone, and I think it's really important that was, you know, that messaging came through, and that as soon as the name change happened, we were there.
That's great. Yeah.
LGBTQ+ flash news. The Queen's Buckingham Palace used to be an old gay cruising site.
Shocking.
Oh my God.
At Queer News Tonight, we love LGBTQ+ history. In the 2013 paper, Homosexuality in 18th Century England by Richter Norman, the queer historian has found that parts of what are now Buckingham Palace used to be a male brothel. In the paper, he writes, quote, Clement Walker in 1649 referred to new erected Sodoms and spintries at the Mulberry Garden at St. James. It is amusing to note the possible existence of gay brothels on the site that is now occupied by Buckingham Palace. Unquote. It seems the queens have always been drawn to that location. But
I'm speechless.
Well, having been to the gates of Buckingham Palace many times, and GAY nightclub is only 3 blocks from there, I completely understand the truth behind this story.
Yeah, and I wonder if they also have drag shows at that palace.
Oh, I think every day there is a drag show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Glenn, you're going to finish up?
I am. Thank you for saying that. That is today's news for the LGBTQ+ community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ+ evening news show. Is our community important to you?
Then help us by liking and subscribing. Ring the bell for updates. Share this news with your friends and family.
Post this broadcast in your many groups you are a member of. Tonight's story about our community deserves the attention of your family and friends.
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ+ digital television network in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support.
If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world. This is the only place in the world that tells these LGBTQ+ stories in motion and sound. And that is the passion of Happening Out Television Network and Queer News Tonight. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of these LGBTQ+ reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Glen Weinzimer, Cindy Brown, Gabriel Paez, and Steve Rothaus. We will see you daily at 8 p.m.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
LGBTQ+ news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ.
Appreciate being here.
It's okay if I call you Stephen?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, you caught all of our attention. Your bet is quoted on the back cover, which I thought was fascinating, about this book. We are innately sexual creatures. What should come natural gets mutilated and destroyed by shame, fear, and ignorance. We crave emotional intimacy, yet dare to risk letting others know who we really are. Hiding behind a mask leaves us feeling disconnected, lonely, and sexually unfulfilled. It doesn't have to be like this. Wow, that is a mantra to launch the book. Tell us about, first off, you are a therapist here in South Florida, Manners?
Northeast 26th Street in Milton Manor.
All right. And I understand to be a therapist, once you move into as a sex therapist. That's an additional standard, and you're called a sexology specialist.
Right. I'm a clinical sexologist, and sexologist, you have to already be licensed as a therapist in a discipline of social work, psychology, counseling, marriage and family therapy, and then sexology becomes a specialization.
Now, in the title of your book, Sexual Integrity, let's get the 14-year-old junior high school questions out of the way instantaneously. You must face through your life and career a lot of jokes about sexology and being a specialist, being gay, and working with so many gay men. You must.
I have had a lot of jokes, and sometimes I just choose to not tell people what I do.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes people confuse sex therapist or sexologist with sex surrogate. So I've had to have a few occasions where I explain to people that I don't have sex with my clients, that I would lose my license for that.
Right.
But I do enjoy educating people about sexology. Many people don't know that there actually is a science to sex.
Yeah. So we can't find you on Grindr. You may be in Grindr, but your practice is not launched out of Grindr. See, that's the 14-year-old gay man joke.
Right. You won't find me there.
No. And the issue, it didn't even dawn on me that you did that in your practice. I imagine that has a lot to do, really as a jumping off point for the title of the book, Sexual Integrity. Describe for us what you mean in terms of the theme of the book and what is sexual integrity.
Well, my view is that sexual integrity is about being transparent and honest with yourself and others, your partners, about who you are as a sexual being. And that's not just about coming out in terms of your sexual orientation, but it's also about being honest about what you like, what you don't like, looking at parts of your sexuality that have been repressed, that maybe you've tried to deny or hide, but you continue to have thoughts, desires, fantasies, and instead of repressing those, you embrace them and accept them.
Is it a situation in terms of the coming out experience for let's focus on gay men, the repression of the coming out experience and society's historic rejection of the gay community and gay men, is that part of the process that begins the interference of our honesty and integrity?
Absolutely, because certainly for men in our age group, very early in our life, hiding, lying, denying was part of how we survived. And that gets ingrained in us very early. We learn that this is part of how I have to function in order to survive in this culture. And as you know, our culture is very different now from when you and I were growing up. Younger people have rights and access to services and resources that we didn't have when we were younger. So it will be interesting to see 50 years from now how those people age and how they embrace their own different from our generation.
I quite imagine Gen Zers are going to respond completely different than baby boomers as gay men, that when they get to the age that boomers are today, they're probably very likely going to respond differently. I'm curious also in terms of the counseling. You're living in what we always joke is the gayest place on planet Earth, and there is some truth to this joke. You're from Nashville. Nashville, while a large metropolitan, more progressive for the state of Tennessee. Do you see differences of what it would be like to be a gay man in Nashville or other places in Tennessee or other places around the country as compared to what you've seen here in Wilton Manors and Fort Lauderdale?
Well, absolutely. And, we also have to remember that there are lots of people who grow up in very rural places in this country. in Alabama, in Mississippi, in Wyoming. And so that is even a different experience from growing up in Nashville or living here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. One of my reasons for moving to this area is because Fort Lauderdale is already a wonderful community for LGBTQ people to age in place. There are services here, resources here. Fort Lauderdale has already figured it out in a way that most of the rest of the country has not figured out how to provide good aging services to LGBTQ seniors.
I'm curious, with you being here in Fort Lauderdale in Broward County, you have a subtitle on your book called "The Sexual Integrity Coach." Explain that to me.
Well, that's my registered trademark. Integrity coaching, sexual integrity coaching is what I do. And I made that realization about 10 years ago when I first began thinking of the concept of sexual integrity, that virtually every sex therapy case I've had over the last 30 years have been helping individuals, couples get more honest, get more accepting of themselves and their partners, and to live with a greater sense of integrity in their life. And I want to comment that there are other books out there about sexual integrity. Some of them are written from a religious or very moralistic perspective, where they are coaching people to repress who they are, to hide those parts of themselves that might not be mainstream.
And that's focusing on the gay community or
It's
even the
focusing on
broad
anyone.
community?
It's focusing on the broad community. And my experience is that we are who we are. And it doesn't matter how much we repress different aspects of our personality, it doesn't mean that those things go away. They generally find their way to the surface. And so much of what people feel shame about sexually is really normal and healthy, not illegal and not unsafe. And if we just embrace it, then we're going to have greater sexual fulfillment and likely even more intimacy in our relationship.
I said in your introduction, your specialization on gender identity. We have a program here at Happening Out Television Network called Translation that focuses on the trans community. I notice you focus much of your integrity coach and work as a sexologist in kink. Tell me a little bit about what goes on there.
Well, kink is the word I use because it's the word people who are kinky use. A more clinical term might be paraphilia, but it sounds a little too sterile and clinical and off-putting, and it doesn't sound sexy at all. And so I use the word kink because that's how my clients talk about aspects of their personality that are not vanilla, not traditional or mainstream, but are a very important aspect of their sexual expression.
You know, it's very funny to me because I think many people would think gay men, especially if we focus on that portion of the LGBTQ plus community, would be very out there in every way, and there wouldn't be this need. But that's probably the furthest thing from the truth, don't you think?
Well, I say that we have many closets that we have to come out of, and sometimes we first come out of the gay closet, and then later we might come out of some form of kinky closet. And so, you know, I'm helping gay men, straight men, really embrace those parts of themselves that they have tried to hide. And sometimes people come to therapy because that hidden part has been discovered. And they're in crisis. Their partner found out, their employer found out, a family member found out. And we're just working to integrate those parts of ourselves that may be completely benign, but about which we still feel a lot of fear and shame.
You know, it's funny. I understand what you've just said so clearly, because when we started Queer News Tonight, we said we're out of the closet and into the headlines. And in a way, that's exactly what you're doing for the LGBT community. Now, do you only counsel just gay men, or tell us how your practice works.
Well, 3 years ago, I moved here from Nashville, and I had practiced in Nashville all my life. My clients were mostly cisgender straight, and also mostly male. When I worked with women, often I was working with them because I was seeing their male partner or husband. Here in Fort Lauderdale, my practice is about 50-50. Gay and straight, and I'm very comfortable with that. I've never wanted to just kind of lock myself into working with
and
only
your cisgender clients, patients know you're gay. Or does that ever come up even?
Well, it rarely comes up. Right. As therapists, we really try to be a blank slate and not sit and talk about ourselves during the session.
Right.
So if someone asks me that, I'll certainly tell them.
Right.
But it rarely comes up.
You know, Stephen, I don't know back right now at Steel Magnolias in that moment where Dolly Parton says, of course you, and Olympia Dukakis, of course you can sit down and tell us every strange story that you've experienced. Of course you can. Anything you want to tell us about any of your patients that...
Well, I have a lot of stories in the book.
Oh,
so
okay.
there are plenty of stories if you buy the
you're an
book.
Entrepreneur also, I see.
These
there we go.
The book is full of case studies, and of course, it's very confidential. I don't disclose any personal information that would identify the client. And one of the other things that I say is that some of these stories are really a compilation of many different clients that I've worked with around the same subject. When people come into therapy, they often feel very unique, but you know, if you've been practicing for a long time, you've worked with a lot of people who have been in similar situations or experiences.
I would think that would be reassuring to your patients to learn this is completely common.
Yes, and that's another thing I wanted to communicate in the book, is that you are a lot more normal than you think you are.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, if you were going to make a recommendation in sexology as a sexology specialist and an integrity, a sexual integrity coach to the LGBTQ community, but specifically gay men, what would a top of the list recommendation be that should be considered?
Well, this will sound very simplistic, but it's one of the most difficult things for us to do, and that is to just be ourselves. Because so many of us have had to hide throughout our life, we have gotten very disconnected from who we are. And I really coach people to get clarity about who you are and what you want and lean into it. And there's a lot of strength in our community that we don't give ourselves credit for. We're very resilient. We are survivors. There are lots of things that we've seen and experienced and fought for in our lifetime. So look at those strengths that you have as an individual and celebrate them. Define yourself. Don't let the mainstream define who you are.
Yeah, very interesting. It's a book that I want to read. Sexual Integrity, we're showing you the image of it, Finding the Courage to Be Yourself. Stephen, we're really happy to have you on Queer News tonight. You're so close to us. I have this feeling, this feeling that we're going to have you in and talk much more on this subject. Do you find that there is surprise here in Fort Lauderdale, the gayest place on planet Earth? Do you find surprise from many that go, I'm surprised that you exist and that your specialization exists here? Or what's your reaction from the community and that you're here and counseling in sexology?
Well, there are actually quite a few sexologists, sex therapists in Florida. Florida has some unique licensing requirements that are different from other states so that people can market themselves as a sex therapist. Now, most states will let anyone identify as a sex therapist if they're already licensed as a therapist. But as I make reference to in the book, when I became a licensed therapist, I my license allowed me to diagnose and treat sexual disorders, but my graduate program at that time never required that I take a single course in human sexuality. And that's the case not just for therapists, but also for physicians, for nurses, for healthcare professionals in general. Most healthcare professionals do not have any training in sexology, human sexuality, maybe training in biology, anatomy, and physiology, but as you know, that's not the whole story.
Right.
So I think people are sometimes reassured to know that there is actually a demographic of healthcare professionals who are trained in sexual science and have a specialty in sex therapy.
Very, very interesting. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more. So the book is called Sexual Integrity, Finding the Courage to Be Yourself. Right here in our own backyard, transplant from Nashville, Tennessee, Dr. Stephen Davidson, sexology specialist and the sexual integrity coach. Very happy to have you tonight here on Queer News Tonight.
Thank you.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus